again, Guyana, and welcome to the Public Interest. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us this week. This week's edition is designed to focus on citizenship, immigration, and Guyana's security. As always, on the panel with me is President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika.
And joining us today, I begin by introducing Ms. Delicia Fletcher Bailey. She's from MTV News Update. Welcome, Delicia.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome to you, Rabindra Rooplall from the Guyana Chronicle.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Mr. President, a new ministry has been formed just about 6 months ago, or a little less. That's the Ministry of Citizenship. Could you give an update thus far on reports that you've received from the minister, that's Minister Winston Felix, the Minister of Citizenship, regarding the ministry's progression, especially since it's basically a new ministry?
That's an important ministry, and it is a novel ministry in the sense that people never really paid much attention to the role of citizenship in statehood. But we were aware for several years that there had been malpractices, and we have a vision that every single Guyanese in every part of the world must be registered, that the state of Guyana has responsibility for its citizens in the diaspora, and that even in our homeland here in Guyana, sometimes because of poverty, sometimes because of distance, many children born are never registered. And it's only when it is time to vote in elections you discover this. So even before we got into office, we realized that citizenship was an important element in governance, and that is why the ministry was created in the first place. Now, having created the ministry, we are discovering that there were many malpractices, and it is the ministry's mission now to eliminate those malpractices, to ensure that every citizen is registered and can enjoy the benefits of citizenship, and also that persons who are not authorized, that is, illegal aliens, criminals who are seeking refuge or who are in flight from other jurisdictions, do not get hold of Guyanese birth certificates and passports. So the establishment of a separate Ministry of Citizenship is an important development in Guyanese governance. And I can say I'm glad to see that the fraud and other malpractices are being uncovered, but I think it shows Guyanese that the policy of our administration was a well-informed policy, and it will eventuate in having a more stable approach to Guyanese citizenship and the rights of those citizens.
Do you, finally, before I go over to the other journalists, do you see the fraud and malpractices being currently discovered? Do you see it as a major challenge for the ministry that could possibly stymie its efforts and works?
There are challenges. There are challenges which have to be overcome. It is quite evident that some of those malpractices were perpetrated as a result of political purposes. For example, only in a few weeks before the last elections, certain communities were being targeted for registration, other communities were being ignored. We want to have a national system which is transparent, and every single Guyanese, at the time of birth, at the time he or she goes to school, whenever, as soon as possible after birth, must be registered, and thereafter the state would know everything concerning that person's movements, birth, marriage, death, access to education, time to vote, and all that. I think in years to come, people will see the importance and the significance of what we're doing now. It's putting citizenship on a stable footing.
All right, thank you, sir. Lady and gentlemen, it's time for you to pose your questions on today's topic. I think, Rabindra, you'd like to go first.
Hi, Mr. President. How would the state deal with persons caught in facilitating corrupt transactions pertaining to the birth registration process?
Well, we are now discovering some of the malpractices. Some of them might have been the result of inefficiency. Some of them might be deliberate, in which persons who are interested in speeding up the process might have paid a bribe, to corrupt public servants. But what we want to see is a digitization of the process so that it is not reduced to the slow pen and paper process. People must be able to go digital. That will help to reduce fraud, and it will speed up the process. This is a normal function, having a birth certificate or a marriage certificate or a death certificate or a registration card. These are normal functions in any state. But because of the slothfulness, because of the fact that there has been political contamination in the process, I think we have ended up where we are today. So what I see is that the ministry has a lot of work to do in speeding up that process, removing fraud, and it will involve removing people who themselves are corrupt. But I am confident that in the middle term, we'll have a clean, transparent process.
Delicia.
Mr. President, to address these malpractices, is there a specific or set number of policies or ways that we're actually going to address it? Or are we still learning as we go along and discover new things?
No, the policies are there. It's just those policies have been twisted out of shape by persons who are bent on making money where they should not make money through fraudulent practices. And we want to make sure that the persons who are involved in the process are not only well paid, well trained, but they are not susceptible to graft. You know, one of the first steps I took after being sworn in on the 16th of May was to meet with the public servants and tell them I'm interested in an unbribable public service. And there obviously has been corruption and some political interference in the GRO, and that will be brought to an end. So the laws are there. It's always a question of enforcement. It's always a question of enforcement.
Okay. So you also spoke of a modern system that captures all Guyanese from birth to the end. This is a massive undertaking. Have we really, is this just in the idea stages, or have we gone beyond that?
It is between idea and implementation, if you want to put it like that. What we intend is that remove the responsibility or the liability from the citizen himself or herself to the state. That is, if a child is born, it is the state's duty to register that child. Right now, the obligation rests on the shoulders of the parent. And if that parent, for example, is living up a creek or living in some remote area, it is, you know, most children, I think, in some hinterland communities are still brought into this world by midwives or persons who are not in hospitals. But the state must find that child when he or she tries to go into the education system or goes to hospital. Are you registered? What is your registration number? If not, register that child there. So I would say it is part idea, but we are ensuring that when children enter the public world, that is in the school, health, or any other system, certainly before he's ready for NIS or you know, employment, that child will be given some form of identification with a number which stays with him or her from the time of birth right down to his or her death certificate, from birth certificate to death certificate, literally, so that we don't have any room for malpractice. Because if you are citizen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you remain citizen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 till you die. So that is what we are aiming at eventually, and we are working in that direction. So we haven't implemented it as yet, but I expect that will be happening in 2017.
Okay, we still have some more time on the topic.
Mr. President, what does the government plan to do with its porous borders and the issue of illegal aliens entering the country, especially where there are issues of the drug trade, illegal guns and so forth, and a lot of other issues with trafficking in persons and etc.?
That's a very good question, Rabindra. What I would say is that we are aware of the size of the problem. The coastline alone is nearly 450 kilometers, and the border with Brazil, which is of course a large producer, one of the world's largest producers of small arms, over 1,100 kilometers, and of course you have long borders with Venezuela and Suriname as well. What we intend to do, and what has started to happen, and I think some other politicians don't realize what is taking place, is that there is going to be a much greater deployment of the defense force in the hinterland on borders. Secondly, the police are right now moving horses into some hinterland areas so that they can conduct mounted patrols, so we don't have to carry gasoline and vehicles into those areas. So I would reckon that within a few months' time, certainly by mid-year 2017, you'll see more effective control over our borders by both the defense force and the police force. They would need to get other aircraft, for example, surveillance aircraft, because the distances, as I said, are great. The coastline alone, if you are to clamp down on piracy, would require better coastal vessels, and they will also require better aircraft. Over the last 6 months, we've been using hired civilian aircraft, but that could be very expensive to fly along the coast to detect any incidents of piracy. So we do have a plan, and that plan calls for giving the police force in the first instance better assets. You may know, you may have read in the newspapers also that the Police Division F, which is responsible for the entire Guyana, west of, as they call it, west of Fort Island. That is most of Region 1, Region 7, Region 8, Region 9. Not so much Region 2, which is Police Division G. That huge area is regarded as Police Division F. The commander used to be based in Evil area, Rabindra, so he's now been moved to Bartica, which is in Region 7 itself. There's an aerodrome, and we expect that he'll be given more riverine craft, so he'll be able to patrol the rivers. So in the middle term, I see the police force in F Division, because the commander is there in Bartica, able to do more aviation patrols, more maritime, more riverine patrols, and help to bring that banditry problem in the mining areas under control. Similarly, the Army and the police will be in the open areas, Region 9, doing mounted patrols. So we are aware of the problem, and we are taking a very decisive step to give the police and army the assets so that the crimes that occur on the borders, trafficking in cocaine, trafficking in weapons, trafficking in persons, are not imported onto the coastline. You see, the crimes start there. The guns don't drop from the air, the guns come across the border, the cocaine comes across the border. So that is our strategy, and it is unfolding. The strategy is unfolding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we must move on to our open segment where you're free to pose other questions to the President.
I just have one short question.
You're free to use the time to do that.
Mr. President, that, once again, this plan, massive undertaking, but is there one small thing that the individual can do? Because oftentimes I believe individuals are overlooked in that they can actually play a massive role in the taking of any criminal organization. So is there one small thing that the individual can do to help with everything from the porous borders and the cross of drugs and crime and criminal activity in the mining communities and everything?
Well, there are several things the individual could do, because we want the parents, particularly at household level, we want communities at the level of the churches, the mandirs and the masjids, the level of NGOs to take a role. I mean, what we see occurring in Paris 7 days ago on Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, that's a suspicious, not auspicious, rather suspicious, is that we want to see parents more involved in ensuring their children are not exposed to the type of extremism which would lead them to get involved in that type of crime. At the community level, I would like to see a new thrust towards community policing. Community policing doesn't mean giving people handcuffs and baton and blue t-shirts. It is a form of relationship between the community and the police. So I would like to see that in weeks and months to come, the CPG system that we have will be transformed into one in which the police commanders and the citizens in any community sit down and decide how those communities are to be protected. Sometimes you go around this country, you might see a little a little monument or a cross where some little girl has been raped and murdered, like in Wackenham or in Mocha, Arcadia. And you might go in quarantine, you see a place where some 80-year-old woman was raped and murdered. These are crimes which I think would alarm any community, that the most vulnerable citizens are sometimes deprived of the protection of the state, of the police. Now, I see a community policing system in which the police are aware of these vulnerabilities and take preventive action. If you know that schoolgirls pass through some maybe some bushy area, and young unemployed boys are there loitering, looking for mischief, maybe we can look at some system of having school buses or patrolling those areas. But the community and the police have to work together, not with batons and handcuffs, but with a form of policing which informs the police how to protect the society better. So there's a lot that could be done from the level of the individual, from the level of the family, from the churches and mandates, in the schools. Again, in the schools, we must inculcate the values of respect for each other. Again, this is something that you would have realized from last week, Friday, that there was obviously gross disregard for human life. But in Guyana, these are values we respect. You know, these are values our main religions, at least Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism teach that you don't take human life like, at all. So there's a lot that could be done, but it is not the responsibility of the state alone. The citizens must be involved in this process. Guyana is a great country, and I believe that with the spread of these values, not only enforcement, it's not just a matter of arresting people and putting them in jail, but it's also training our young people in the churches and the schools to respect each other. And we'll have a happier society, we'll have that good life.
It's open, so go ahead, Rabindra.
Mr. President, what is your view on the perception that criminals are interlinked with members of the disciplined forces, and the image and confidence of the sector that needs to be boosted with actions taken against anyone or member of the force being found guilty of such acts, since there is a report that more person's confidence needs to be more, built within the sector?
It's a work in progress. As you know, we are emerging from a very long, dark period in Guyana's security history. Over the last 15 years or so, we've had engagements, particularly with the government of the United Kingdom. We've had over a dozen visits by British security teams. That culminated in a security sector reform action plan, which unfortunately last administration just threw out the window. So we are now re-engaging to have that plan brought back on the table. The troubles and the troubles that occurred largely between 2000 and 2008 did have an impact not only on the communities, but also the confidence the communities had in the police. But more so, there was an impact on the police force itself, because some police were apparently given political instructions, and many crimes were not fully investigated. For example, the most notorious case is the one in which a minister of the government was assassinated, and there has not even been a coroner's inquest. There's not been a commission of inquiry. In fact, the family of that minister had to sue the government. And even now that matter has not been satisfactorily resolved. So a lot needs to be done still to recover from the damage of that 15-year period between 1999 and 2000 and the present time. And it's not just a matter of conducting another inquiry or investigating, but it's a matter of ensuring the police force is given the quality training, they're properly paid and equipped, they're given the assets, aircraft, boats, and so on. They are given senior commanders who are incorruptible, as far as we could make them incorruptible. And the police force itself is well managed, well organized, well directed. a lot depends on police reform. And it is a great pity that 6 or 7 years ago we did not embark on that process of police reform. We're doing that now. We're doing that now. And I re-engaged the British High Commission here. When I was at the United Nations General Assembly, I had the opportunity to meet the British Prime Minister. And he said, what do we want? I said, I want the Security Sector Reform Action Plan back on the table. So I'm confident that in the medium term, we are going to have that plan back. It costs over £3.5 million sterling, but we are working on police reform. There are a few rotten eggs, but I believe in the fullness of time, those persons who are corrupt, rogue cops as they're called by the media, would be identified and separated from the force. There are a lot of complaints against the police, and there's a police complaints authority, there's an office of professional responsibility. We need to look at the functioning of these two offices. I was on the Disciplined Forces Commission in 2013, 2014, and those are two areas that need strengthening. The PCA under Justice Kennard, and the OPR, which is part of the Office of the Commissioner. There are certain weaknesses and deficiencies there which we try to correct.
Mr. President, the U.S. officials here in the 1970s described you as an anti-East Indian racist. Are you an anti-East Indian racist?
Of course not. I've never been described as such. I don't know who made that allegation. I don't know what evidence he or she had. But it's completely groundless and even malicious to try to revive something, you know, that somebody somewhere said, you know, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. Where's the evidence? You know, I've never been described as such in my entire life. I was astonished to read it, and I was ashamed that any editor would publish such nonsense without about the head of state, without even seeking to provide some evidence that there was some truth in it. I mean, I'm not so much disappointed the United States person who is supposed to have said it. I'm disappointed that the editor who exercised poor judgment in putting that type of information about the head of state in the newspaper.
We still have some more time on the program. Delicia, I'll give you another chance.
Okay, yes, great. Jonestown, Mr. President, it's been about 3 decades since that horrific ordeal on Guyana's history. Is it on the administration's agenda at this point in time to provide some type of closure on this issue?
I do know that in the wake of the catastrophe, a commission of inquiry was convened. I don't think the commission ever sat. It was under the former Chancellor, Justice Victor Crane. I don't believe that there was ever a thorough investigation on the part of Guyana, the government of Guyana. Of course, several books have been written about it based on journalist reports. But there's not been a demand in Guyana that I'm aware of for any type of investigation into what happened. I am concerned with some of the incidents which occurred in the more recent past, that is over that period, 1999 to 2015, where there are actually living Guyanese who want answers to the disappearance or the death of their loved ones. And that is my concern right now, to give closure to those reports. For example, the assassination of the Minister of Government. And there are several other people who died. Because if you go around this country, particularly Bartica, you see a huge monument to the death of those persons in Bartica, the massacre. If you go to Friendship Village on the East Coast, there's a huge monument, in Buxton Village actually. And if you go to the police force in Evelyn, you see another monument to the number of policemen who were killed. And right now the police force is setting up a fund to provide for the widows and the children of the persons who were killed. That is my concern, dealing with the living. And I expect that in the not too distant future, there will be an investigation into those deaths. We certainly want at least inquests and a recommendation was made, even at the time of the Discipline Forces Commission, to establish a department, a coroner's department. Every magistrate should be a coroner within his or her district, within his or her jurisdiction. But many deaths have taken place, some by unnatural means, some clearly violent, and we have not got coroner's reports about them. So there's a lot of work we have to do to correct the deficiencies and malpractices over the last 20 years or so. But right now, I don't have any objection to investigating the death of Georgetown, but the living Guyanese who lost their loved ones over the last 15 years also require answers, and I prefer to deal with that first as a matter of priority.
Lady and gentlemen, sorry, we just have a few moments left in today's program, so I advise that you choose your final questions wisely. Rabindra.
Okay, since that's the final question. Mr. President, I know the government is promoting a green economy. What is the earliest deadline the government is seeking to implement the wind farm project at Hope Beach?
We are not about to embark on that as a government project, and we expect that private investors would be able to embark on that project. I don't see the government getting involved in that type of activity now. We want to expose the entire nation to the possibilities of a green economy. You know, wind, solar power, hydropower. There are a lot of energy saving devices now. People are using ethanol, people are using electric cars. We want to see household appliances. In fact, there was a very good demonstration on the Independence Park 3 weeks ago, mounted by the City Council. And there's a wide variety of equipment. And the government is interested now in exposing the public to the possibilities of embarking more deeply in that green economy. So we see ourselves as facilitators rather than owners of these enterprises. What we're working towards too is making Bartica a green town. So you'll be able to visit Bartica, I hope by the middle of next year, and see many of these appliances at work. Green Bartica, green Guyana.
Final one from you, Delicia.
Budget 2016, Mr. President. Will there be any surprises? Have you come down to what's going to be in there?
We are very close. As you know, it's already November, and the budget is on stream. We are likely to present it in January. In fact, there will be two budgets in 2017. We want to produce in 2016, sorry. We want to produce the 2017 budget in December 2016. So you'll be able to start the first working day of 2017, knowing very well where the money is going to be spent. Surprises? No. As you know, we have created two specific ministries, Social Cohesion, Ministry of Social Protection, emphasizing our concern about the human condition, about alleviation of poverty, and about national unity. And there will be emphasis on those social factors. But on the economic side, on the developmental side, you will see a greater emphasis on infrastructure. This country cannot be developed without proper infrastructure, without better highways and bridges, without dealing with this, the problem of stellings, the problem of aerodromes, the Demerara Harbor Bridge. If we are to develop this country, we have to have a solid infrastructure base before we build the superstructure. So you're going to see some of that in the budget for financial year 2016.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Thank you, Delicia Fletcher Bailey, MTV News Update, and thank you, Rabindra Rooplall, the Guyana Chronicle. This has been another edition of The Public Interest. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thanks for watching.